Matthew chapter 5, the Sermon on the Mount. And I realized I've been doing something that I intended not to do. My intention was not to go through verse by verse by verse, because it'd take forever to get through the whole book of Matthew alone. But I have been. And I'm in a little bit of a quandary, because I could just say, and Jesus had the Sermon on the Mount, you need to go read it for yourself. Lots of good stuff in it. Principles of living according to God's design, and turning the world's logic upside down so that God's design and logic can prevail. I could, but I don't think I want to. So bear with me, because I'm going to continue kind of in a verse by verse, at the very least thought by thought, as we work our way through the only sermon that we have of this length recorded from Jesus. So, all right, that's more for my conscience than for your edification. Chapter 5, verse 17. You know, when we think of Jesus, most people, when they think of Jesus, they think of this, well, you think about what are the pictures that have been painted of Jesus. They're kind of all like this, aren't they? I mean, they're very beatific. Well, we think of Jesus as meek and mild, and we think of Jesus as he just loved everybody. And isn't he called the Prince of Peace? Well, yeah, Isaiah did say that. Well, fasten your safety belt, because in verse 17, Jesus says, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them." Now, why is that matters? Jesus is saying, I have come to complete what nobody else could, and I'm reading into it, but what nobody else has been able to do with the law. And that is to fulfill it. How do you fulfill the law? By obeying it completely. Yeah, he did. We have it on this authority of Scripture in the book of Hebrews. It says he was tempted like we are in all ways, but without sin, meaning he never committed a sin. But he said, I didn't come to abolish the law or the prophets, and that's important, because prophets, the role of a prophet in the Old Testament and in the New Testament was to not only to foretell, but to tell forth. And the teachings of the prophets and their prophecies. Jesus didn't come to push them aside, no, he came to fulfill them. And scholars, worlds smarter than myself, have gone through and looked at the more than 70 messianic promises and how Jesus fulfilled each one of those in the 3 years that he walked the earth in physical form. Jesus said, I didn't come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. We can't. We can't fulfill them. Only he could. Verse 18, I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. That conditional statement is quite important and a little bit hard to decipher. on its face value, I think what Jesus was saying is that nothing about the law, not the King James version said not one jot or tittle. And what that means is no dotted I, no crossed T will be omitted. It won't disappear from the law. There were little marks in Hebrew. Just a quick reminder, Hebrew didn't read left to right. It reads right to left. And so there were these little accent, what to me looked like accent marks that have to be included with the letter character to give it meaning. But they're tiny. They're not big. Okay. Anyway, well, none of those will disappear. In other words, the law is intact until everything is accomplished. What does that mean? Well, in this case, it's not too difficult. Everything was accomplished in terms of the law. Everything was accomplished by Jesus in his life, and the finality of this came at his death. There one dramatic symbol of this fact was that when he breathed his last, the curtain in the temple that separated the holy place from the most holy place was torn in two from top to bottom. That was not just this, whoa, what a weird deal. I mean, that was a highly symbolic event. And what's the symbolism? Well, the holy place was accessible to any Jewish priest, but not the most holy place. In the most holy place, there was, and in Jesus' day, I don't know whether it was still present or not. My sense is probably not. But in the original temple, Solomon's temple, the most holy place, and before that, the tabernacle, the most holy place was a chamber which held the Ark of the Covenant, which was the physical symbol of the presence of God. And only the high priest could go in there, and only once a year. This was not something you would, spend a few dollars to take a tour and you walk past it. And no, this was the bedrock symbol of Israel's connection with God. The high priest only went in there once a year, and only the high priest could. No one else could. And so there was this inaccessibility. And when Jesus fulfilled and accomplished the law, it was torn in two, which the symbol of that is there's no longer this restricted access. Now, because Jesus fulfilled the law, we have full, complete access to God. When he, among his last words, was the phrase, "It is finished." It's completed. It's paid in full. Okay, I think that's when everything was accomplished. So does the law no longer apply? Not in the same way that it did before Jesus' death and burial and resurrection. It's the law is no longer immaterial. Look at verse 19. Look what Jesus says. Anyone who breaks one of the least of these commands and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Okay. And that was a statement that Jesus made before he had fulfilled everything, before everything had been accomplished. Well, what's the point? The point is, until the law had been fulfilled, until everything had been accomplished, it was binding. And to teach otherwise and to practice otherwise, it left you outside of God's design and his kingdom. Verse 20, for I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. Wow. All right, now, we cannot, I just don't think that we can interpret the meaning, the meaning for us in its application, if we lose sight of this phrase, until everything is accomplished. Once everything was accomplished, then what? Well, then it's not about my righteousness. The righteousness of the Pharisees was famous. They would tithe down to the mint leaves in their garden. They would, their practices were completely, they projected that their practices were completely in accord with the law. We're going to get into some encounters Jesus had with the Pharisees, and you're going to realize that they were full. They were eaten up with pride about how good they were. And it's not just about a sense of fulfillment because we've done well. No. It's pride that says, I'm so grateful I'm better than them. It's better than, not just better. Okay. I grew up in a church that left me believing that my relationship with God was conditioned on how obedient I am to him. That my righteousness needed to exceed the righteousness of the Pharisees. They taught and acted as though everything had not been completed. I don't live there anymore. That's not my address. I don't want it to be yours either. We are fully accepted by God, not because of our obedient behavior. We're accepted because of his love and grace. And as we permit his grace and love to work in our hearts, we obey his design. But we don't get there through obedience. Obedience is the outcome. Okay, so does that mean obedience doesn't mean anything? What do you think? Chew on that until next time. I'll see you then on Soul Care with Stevie.